What I realized is it's not about motivation. It's just freaking scheduling it. For me, I wanted to be more toned and I wanted to do more, combine my running with weight. So just schedule it, make it as a commitment to yourself as a human that for these reasons, so there's a strong why. Like for me, I've got 4 kids and one of them's a 6-year-old. He needs me to be super fit. So I've turned something I hated doing, weights, and something I love doing because I just scheduled it. No part of me wanted to get out of bed, no part of me wanted to walk towards the back deck and pull those weights out. But within sort of a few minutes, I was onto it. And it just came down to a commitment, a strong reason of why. Take the thinking out of it, just schedule it and crack on with it.
Welcome back to Care Beyond Profits. I'm Azura Ali. In this episode, I'm excited to be joined by Mark Longbottom. Mark is the founder and host of Purposeful podcast, and he's also the head of community and engagement at Trust Investment New Zealand. Mark spent over 2 decades in the UK and New Zealand charity world, helping leaders and organisations connect business and purpose. This was a fun conversation. It really stood out to me how Mark reminds us that change starts with consistency and not motivation, and that leadership needs to be obsessive clarity even if it ends up being wrong. In this episode, he also shares how clarity and empathy can coexist and his observations on why serving others leads to personal happiness. If this episode speaks to you, please like, share, and subscribe to Care Beyond Profits. Let's get into it. Mark, I am so thrilled to have you here today. Thank you very much for joining me.
Wonderful, really good to connect and really good to be on the show.
Thank you, Mark. Hey, before we dive in, I want to take us back on a little story back to your origins. So, for all of the listeners out there today, what shaped your start of your journey and where did it all begin?
Yeah, so for me, born in 5 decades ago, the 70s in Aotearoa, New Zealand, and a shore boy, so the north shore of Auckland, New Zealand's largest city. And we have born into a family with 2 sisters. I was the eldest child. Loving, happy family home, really privileged and, proud to be growing up as a New Zealander. But for me, this sort of obsession, I guess, entered my life through the TV screen or through media, even though I loved where I was brought up and where I grew up, I had this obsession with living in the UK. And I don't know 100% where it came from. It possibly came from, as I said, TV screen. Where a lot of our culture was imported from the UK and America. And I just had this absolute obsession with living in the UK. So, yeah, growing up, happy family home, but a desire to travel. And I guess it also tied into that narrative, that common thing for young people, which is to some point go on their OE and experience overseas. And I guess that comes from being a small island in the back of the Pacific and beyond, is to go and, try the overseas thing. So yeah, that's kind of ends up shaping quite a bit of my life. But yeah, back in New Zealand now and been back in New Zealand for almost 6 years. So.
Oh, that's lovely. And in terms of where you were before that, so when you were away, what was your journey like? What did you end up doing overseas?
Yeah, I didn't leave straight away. So I finished school and I did some uni locally. But yeah, ended up spending 20 plus years in the UK, working in the charity sector to start with, roles with the Terence Higgins Trust, which is the first man to die of HIV and AIDS, as trust named after him, set up by his friends. That was my first main role in the UK, but spent a decade running a charitable foundation for a large financial firm called St James's Place. And mixed up where we live. So we lived in London for 7 years. We did 15 years in Bristol, some time in Edinburgh. But yeah, in many ways, I didn't actually think I would make it back to New Zealand. I was a proud Kiwi operating in the UK, and that kind of, suited my identity and also my profession, where the charity sector is really well developed there. But had a wonderful time and I've married a British woman. I've got 4 kids, and 3 of those 4 children are English. The last one we had when we arrived back in New Zealand. But as I said, like, being that kind of dual citizen of half Kiwi, half British, if you like, which sometimes I think my accent tells people that as well. You know, I drop some Kiwi bombs in there and it sounds quite British at other times and people can't quite place me. But yeah, like, really good. I loved my time in the UK.
In terms of how you got into this work, I guess,
Yeah.
what was your motivation? How did you get in? And for the listeners as well, so that we can understand how it all started for you.
Yeah. Good question. So for me, I was always one of those kids who always would do a paper round. I did a milk round, so delivering bottles of milk. Any sort of opportunity that I could do, which was to earn some money, I would do it. I actually ended up, when I was at university, I did a Bachelor of Arts in Sociology at Auckland. And in the weekend, I would sell solid wood furniture. Which actually, looking back, wasn't that sustainable, although we did sell recycled timber towards the end. But a salesman on the weekend selling furniture to families, ostensibly, some quite big deals. But all those roles I'd kind of done in the commerce sector, or, you know, the sort of the retail sector, or, you know, and I had other jobs as well. For me, it didn't quite tick all the boxes in it. And for me, whatever I wanted to do in my life, I wanted it to be a little more purposeful and a more direct line between making money, obviously earning a living, but at the same time, positively impacting people's lives. And so, having done the sociology degree at Auckland, I started to look at ways in which I could work in purpose or in the charity sector. Initially flirted with the idea, my mum's a psychotherapist, and initially floated with the idea of becoming a psychotherapist and going down that sort of working with people and their psychology and their motive, but actually realized that wasn't necessarily the direction I wanted to take it. So first jobs, I think, super important. And I remember having a close friend, and he wanted to do sports marketing. I wanted to work in the charity sector, and we would go on these runs together. We just, nothing too extravagant, sort of 10K, and we were running around Lake Pupuki in the Auckland's North Shore, and we both agreed that what we needed to just choose an industry. For me, charity; for him, sports marketing, and just go in at entry level. So go in wherever we can get a job, land in the right industry. And for me, that was to take a role with the Auckland City Mission. And that was a really good entry level role because that opened my ideas to the need that's out there. The amount of people living on the margins. I remember the first day working for the Auckland City Mission and arriving at their offices in Wellesley Street, and there was a group of homeless people outside the offices, and I had to sort of weave my way through as a sort of green 20-something, early 20s person, and realizing, wow, I've been sort of living this life in a middle class life, but actually there's all these people who are really struggling with life and struggling to get by and struggling with housing and food. So a really good first job in the charity sector, which opened my eyes. And then that first role ended up focusing for me on fundraising and philanthropy. And I don't know if you've had this experience yourself, Azuri, is that first boss impact, like a really awesome human being, a guy called Greg Miller, who is a doyen of New Zealand fundraising, but he was my first boss. And he was really keen on helping me develop my skills, my knowledge, my confidence. So awesome first role. And that sort of whetted my appetite for wanting to work in the for-purpose sector on the philanthropic side or fundraising side, but really close to impacting people's lives. And some of the experiences during that time were quite phenomenal. So although they're an Anglican entity, and you could say question religion's empathy at times, or their ability to steer into stigma, they actually ran a drug and alcohol service. They had a HIV and AIDS service called Herne Bay House. It was respite centre for people who are going through treatment, and some of those people were end of life care they were needing. But they steered into helping people who are really struggling in life and on the margins. And so all these experiences, I was there for 3 years, both from developing a fundraising skills, philanthropy skills, but also in terms of understanding the difference and impact charities could make, and then how effective they could be at changing or helping empower people to be the best version of themselves. And that's kind of where I got really excited about. This is the sector for me, and this is, I think, where my best skills lie. So that was sort of the beginning of it. But it, I remember, this is kind of one experience, is I remember selling jeans, and this is and we're really focused on maximizing profits and selling as many jeans as possible. And I just remember like this real obsession with sales and selling hard, and I thought, this isn't really for me. Like I've got to be closer to purpose and impact, and not just sales and extracting financial value. And I think those sort of things laid the foundations for the roles that I'll go on in the career I've had onwards.
Oh, it's beautiful. And as a child growing up, did you think this is where you'd end up now that you look back at your younger self?
Yes, that's a really good question. I think when you look back, and the biggest influence on me and all of us, I guess, often is our families. And my families were volunteers. They served in the community. They were focused on empathy and kindness. Like the value set that they passed on were definitely leaning towards non-commercial financial. They were definitely leaning towards doing the right thing by people, and when people need you, you be there and you turn up for them. So I think that those experiences about, like in New Zealand, was really focused on community and community values and turning up for your community. So I think that sort of laid the foundations. Not that I thought that at the time, but like having mum who's a therapist, her whole focus is being human-centered therapy, focused on helping people be, to heal, to be the best versions of themselves. So that all kind of fed into my psychology, I guess, and what I want to do in life.
That's beautiful. And in terms of your own life and your values now, if you had to pick just 3 values that you try to live by, what would that be and why?
Humble, obsession with humble, because that's really important to me. Empathetic. And like, I think this, like I'm more and more conscious of empathy, in that put yourself in other people's shoes and try and understand them and their perspective and their journey. And as I, get older and I gain experiences and feel more sure about my knowledge based on the past, actually, I'm all good with the fact that I actually might know not that much about the future. So like when I say empathy, I mean actually curiosity as well, about I might not know everything, and I need to be curious and I need to listen. Because I could talk, right? I enjoy talking and I'm an extrovert. But I really love being curious about people's why and their story. So humble, curious, and empathetic. And just the last one really is kind. Like, let's be kind to each other, right? Because you only get one chance at this life, and people are generally trying to give it their best. So
in your purpose journey, you talk to a lot of people, and what are you seeing that are resonating in terms of their values and all the work that you've done? Is there a value that keeps coming up that you can share with the audience, and what does it sound like, look like?
Yeah, I think there's phase of life, also seasons of life, often that different things become different priorities. So one of the things I did, so we made this decision to head back to New Zealand from the UK, and I didn't envisage us doing that, but we landed back in New Zealand, and I actually found that quite challenging. My wife's saying that she found it just exciting and new and interesting, but I was like, for me, it was coming home was actually a bit of a challenging, difficult transition. One of the things I decided to do to stay connected to my old world, but to forge new connections with people in a new, which is for me was a new country, even though it was a country I was returning to. And I started this podcast, which I've been doing for the last 6 years, to the point of obsession. So it's a weekly interview with a for-purpose leader, mainly focused now in New Zealand, for-purpose leaders, charity leaders in New Zealand, but also overseas. So I have the absolute joy and privilege of having a ton of conversations with people. I hear a ton about what drives people. the one thread, all of that. So I'm talking 260 plus interviews with for purpose leaders. And the really common thing that I hear is people's desire to serve others to make sense of their own existence. So that would be the kind of main thread that runs through it. So that it's almost a selfish thing, but to gain personal happiness, you have to serve others. And that's kind of and whether they're paid to do it, it's a volunteer role, they're a startup, it's their own thing, they're working for others, it's a religious leaning or completely not a faith leaning, this idea of serving others in some way, and people get a lot from that. That would be probably the sort of thread through it.
Talking of service, was there ever a time in your own life that you had to find your way back? And how did you go about doing that and navigating it?
I think a few lost years in London, possibly. We probably maybe not dwell on that, but I think that forming your identity piece, when I talk about the seasons of life just before, around personal identity, personal confidence in who you are, being comfortable with who you are, and actually sort of leaning into your superpowers, what you are good at, what you bring, not trying to, or not being dragged down by the stuff that isn't leaning towards your strengths or isn't necessarily who you are. And I guess if I look back and go, I should have just chilled out a little bit more around what I wasn't and just lean into more of who I was, which, overarching, I did, but there's a whole lot of sort of some anxiety and some worry about, oh no, I need to be more like another person or another type of person, so, and I guess that led, if I look back and have any regrets, it maybe meant that I made some decisions in life that weren't true to me. But saying that, I'm not big, try not to be a big regret person.
Oh, I love that. I love the sincerity with which you're actually sharing this, because I think there's a lot to take just from the advice you've given us, especially in terms of, how we look at life and look at others, and that itself is good advice there.
Thank you.
I want to go into a little bit more around the mindset, because I think a lot of the times leadership it gets stressful. There's a lot of people out there that have really good ideas, a lot of purpose-led leaders. However, there's a lot going on in the world, and sometimes your mind is, there's a battle between doing the right thing and then choosing the path of others. So I want to start off with, was there any decisions in your own life that you had to talk yourself out of a situation, and how did you navigate that in order to keep to your values?
I guess it came leadership roles, like there's your own comfort levels. There's things that you are good at. There's there's times in kind of leadership roles where there was discomfort around, and I'm talking around, challenging negative behavior or calling stuff out. Because I'm a real humanist, or like human focused person, where I really like to know what drives somebody, and I'll a good example of this would be in leadership, someone will come to you and they'll say, look, couldn't get this done, it will affect the organization's ability to transact or be successful, or in maybe in a minor way, but it's we weren't able to do this because of this in my personal life, or this. And my natural inclination was always to be quite human focused. I guess going back to the therapist mum and the empathetic side of me, I guess the learning as in leadership roles was actually that you got a job to do. You've got a mission to deliver on. You've got people, you're there to do something, to be impactful, whether that's, delivering a purpose or it's making money. And actually, it's not necessary to hear through the person's story, or it's not necessary to prioritize empathy in that situation. It's maybe at times to hold them to account. And so that, I think that was the probably biggest learning in leadership, was actually to keep an eye on the task, the mission, the deliverable. Because actually, when you manage yourself, like when I've been in that situation where I'm managed by others, you kind of want you want clarity, and you want them to be focused and obsessive about what you're trying to do. The person leading you, you want them to have absolute clarity around the mission they're on and the deliverable. Because actually, it might not be right for you personally, but at least there's clarity, and everyone's striving for clarity. So it's that learning journey, when you from younger to being led to then leading people, and understanding what good leadership looks like. Was a windy path and not a straight line. And I challenge anyone who says it was. Some people, I guess, are born leaders, but like maybe that's the case. And there are people who it's an easy thing for them. But yeah, I don't, as I said to you, no regrets, and enjoy that development, and forming, like your own views around leadership. I love that leader who has obsessive clarity around, even if they might end up being wrong, at least they would went on a path and they tried something and they had a vision, and it was tied to some sort of viewpoint and thinking like that. That's kind of what I'm keen to do, and that sort of fed into the roles that I've had, and the stuff that I'm doing outside of work.
And for those leaders that are thinking in their minds, I want to make a bigger difference, but I'm feeling stuck, what would be the first thing you would get them to look at?
My preference in that question is probably take it down say you're leading a for-profit company, or, like as a commercial firm, and you're thinking, I'd like to connect this company with a wider, greater purpose. And I implore anyone who's leading a company to really think about the purpose beyond maybe just the widgets that you're making, or the service that you're delivering, whatever. But if you are going to stretch what you do, and there's lots of good reasons why you want to add more purpose to your business, I would challenge anyone to think about it in terms of connecting the widgets you make, the service you deliver, connecting that business IP to the good that you want to do. So whether that's in your community, to the environment, like use your resources, your business resources, the wonderful IP that you've developed that's valuable, use that to help you do good, whether it's, in your community, or it's amongst a group of people, or it's whatever it is. That would be my urging, is to connect the two together. And then it will be sticky. Like, your firm, whatever you're leading it'll all make sense to your employers. It will make sense to, it won't be something random and on the side. The doing good will be, like, I'll give you an example. So I work for a investment firm called Trust Investments, and we help for-purpose organizations who want to, so that's charities, trusts, foundations, and they do good in the community. They deliver a social good or environmental good, but they also want their investments to align with good environmental impact and social good, like, ESG. And so that kind of alignment of thought, action, mission makes a lot of sense to me.
I want to touch on one of those points, actually, because you talked about measuring that success. And obviously this podcast is called Care Beyond Profits. And I think you touched on a very important nugget there. And how do people measure success beyond profit? And how do you actually match that impact? And asking, because of your background, I think the listeners could appreciate with some of that.
Yeah, interesting, because it's, for a lot of businesses through capitalism, it's the only figure that seemed to matter is like shareholder value, profits, like the financial metrics, because they're the easiest to measure, right? Whether that's good or bad. And it is harder to analyze your impact around your environmental impact as a business, possibly, like your impact on the local communities in which you hire from or you serve. And I love movements like the B Corp movement. So B corporations who they call it like triple bottom line. So they go financial metrics, environmental impact, social good. They surface those metrics as equals. So when they do their reporting, whether it's to stay as a B corporation or to their stakeholders, and we're thinking like the board report or the report they pull together, that they've got equal weighting to those things. Like for 10 years, I led that corporate foundation for a financial advisor firm. So face-to-face financial advice. It grew really fast. So it became the largest financial advisory firm in the UK. And it was a meritocracy. So I remember the first day going into there and going to one of the meetings, and they were giving out champagne to the highest earners. So that's purely a financial metric, like it was like highest earners, you're amazing, here's some champagne. But it evolved over time, and actually there was a link to it, and part of it was this charitable foundation, and they ended up giving and donating over £100 million, so $200 million. And where it really got traction was culturally, it was the leaders of that business installed it from the very beginning. They walked the talk. They talked about its importance. But what they did, which is awesome, is they pushed the metrics, or if you're talking like the leaders of the business, and they call it a balanced scorecard. Those leaders, their performance was measured on their positive impact or contribution to the charitable foundation and therefore the community. So that was themselves as people amongst their senior leadership teams in the location, and then also to their wider teams. So it was around not just the cultural element of it, and value set, i.e. we care about the communities we live in. That stuff's kind of easy. You can talk a good game, but actually they measured the performance of their top managers based on their good and their contribution to the foundation. And I thought that was awesome, because that's a publicly listed company. Didn't have to do any of that, but they did. So it's I guess there's a science to that and an art, and it's values linked with actual business design.
There's some real nuggets in that example. Thank you. Obviously, when people are trying to do all of these good things in the world, there's going to be a battle between being efficient and also accomplishing whatever the mission is that they're trying to do. So I want to pivot a little bit about how you juggle that in your own life and some examples on that. Starting with, what do you do to protect your own routine, your focus, your energy across busy weeks?
Yeah. This has evolved, actually. This has changed. So we all talk about motivation, and like we're either motivated or unmotivated. I was listening to something. I'll give you an example. So I love running. I used to be a cyclist, but when I had kids, running was more efficient, and I ended up did a lot of running. But it didn't necessarily deliver the physical benefits, apart from being super fit, but it didn't necessarily change. It didn't necessarily help with the muscle definition or I still put on the middle-aged spread. And there's a couple of things there. The running was awesome for the mind, because what it did is when I had children, it was an hour of physical exertion, something for me when I was really busy at work, had a long commute, and I had kids. So it was really good for the mind. But what I wasn't motivated to do, and that motivation is doing strength work. And this is a very specific example. But what I realized is it's not about motivation. And this is something I had picked up on another podcast, which is it's just freaking scheduling it. So it's just what you want to do. For me, I wanted to be more toned, and I wanted to do more, combine my running with weights. So just schedule it, make it as a commitment to yourself as a human that this is going to, for these reasons, so there's a strong why. Like for me, I've got 4 kids and one of them's a 6-year-old. He needs me to be super fit. But I just a year ago scheduled every morning at 6 a.m. I will do a 45-minute workout. Actually, it started at 30 minutes, but it's been extended. So I've turned something I hated doing, weights, into something I love doing, because I just scheduled it. It was not even like when I wake up, like this morning, and no part of me wanted to get out of bed, no part of me wanted to walk towards the back deck and pull those weights out. But within sort of a few minutes, I was in it, I was onto it. And it just came down to a commitment, a strong reason of why, and then just scheduling it and not trying to think it through. And that's just a very, to get back to your question, is commitment to spend time with my wife. It's just schedules. We walk, we talk. Commitment scheduled to being physically fit, and then just the other stuff around being a really awesome parent. And it just take the thinking out of it. Just schedule it and crack on with it. I don't know if that answers your question, but that's kind of where I've landed. I've realized the power of just scheduling and just doing and not overthinking.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, I think in terms of just being able to schedule things and getting things done, it is very powerful. Sometimes they say go back to the simple, and it actually produces the hard stuff. So I think that you've nailed it there.
And then just also the other stuff is just make sure you like also do some stuff for you, like and for me, I love of watching English football. Not good for my sleep, because often that English football is like at 3 o'clock in the morning, but I love the beaming TV of, like sun shining running through the TV in dark little New Zealand while the game's been beamed from London. Like that's Mark's time. There's no kids awake, everyone's asleep. I know, and that's the bet for me.
That's very powerful. As a mum myself, I can totally relate.
You need some alone time, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Hey, this has been really good. We've talked about a little bit on the efficiency side. We've talked about a lot of the purpose-led work that you're doing. Now, in life, I always believe that the spiritual dimension also plays a part in your life, whatever that might be for every individual. So I want to ask you a little bit more about what that looks like for yourself, and tell us a little bit about, how you got into it, what you're doing.
Yeah, so grew up with one parent a Catholic and the other parent a Protestant. So that's like quite interesting dynamic. So both mum more of a churchgoer than dad more of a lapsed Catholic. A lot of going to church with my mum, and it was in the Anglican faith, and that linked to that first job with the Auckland City Mission. What I loved about the Anglicans is there was, as I said before, there was no stigma about the people that they would help. There was no selection criteria other than those people needed support and help. And I love the empathy that was alive and kicking in that religion. I just couldn't and never have been able to get down with the fact that there's some idea of Jesus or actual physical God like that existed. And so I've got this sense of spirituality around the human experience. The rest of it's super vague, but it's this doing, as I said, right at the start, is around serving others it's the right thing to do, and that's linked to like human spirit, and that's kind of, for me, that's where it begins and ends. Like and the rest of it I find sometimes super distracting, and it can be super negative, and it can divide people. Lots of examples of division of people, and I hate division. I hate, I want to still get on. So yeah, that covers it. So I'm totally empathetic towards people's position in terms of their faith and their beliefs, but I don't like it when it divides and ends up being hateful and negative.
There's so much to learn from that in terms of when people are feeling stressed and also trying to juggle their own lifestyles. There's a lot of mental health issues that are out there that we all connect to. I guess, what are you doing in that mind space to keep yourself, positive and, we're trying to navigate so many different things. So how are you managing that for yourself, and what does that space look like for you?
Yeah, it's good reflection. Like as you go on, you get to know yourself through the eyes and views of others. And there's actually a close friend who said, Mark is a passionate person. And this is only like 15 years ago. I was like, am I? Oh my gosh, am I? It's that reflection on, and so this ties in with like when I'm at my most passionate, that could be passionate for good, or sometimes it could be a passionate that can end up being negative because it's like an override. The passion can override the sense sometimes, and being too energized by something or exercised by something, and it might impact my performance or that passion, because sometimes impassioned is better. So for my own mental health is not to overthink. Check on the passion, use the passion for good, but check when it's heading towards the possibly negative. And I think that's really good for my mental health. And I sort of touched on it when I talked about the scheduling, like just not to overthink stuff, because you're not that important, and you realize life goes on without your ups and downs, or highs and lows in your own head. Not overthinking. And I'm pretty, part of having children and being really focused as a parent, with an awesome, lovely wife, and you realize the sun still rises. And the good thing, and this ties into, I guess, being in the age I am, you realize that stuff gets sorted out, and that whole thing of like the sun will still shine, and the tough time you're going through at the moment won't last. So kind of perspective, which you don't often have in your early teens. Like I had friends who sadly decide to end their lives, and I just think they lack that perspective that whatever they were going through at that time wasn't going to last, and that actually they were going to see through that difficult period, and they need to trust that process, because that's the gift, the joy of being older, right? Like you realize that stuff does get better. So yeah.
Thank you, Mark. Before we end today, I want to ask you, if tomorrow was your last day on this earth, but you've got one chance to make a change and it will come true, what would that wish be from yourself?
Yeah, just the end of poverty, like say everyone has enough. For me, that would be because I think if everyone had enough, there wouldn't be the division and there wouldn't be the hate. So it would be, and if the extension of that conversation is how would you like to spend that day, easy answer would be, it would just be amongst family and friends, because they're the ones who really care about you. But yeah, everyone has enough and everyone gets to be the best version of themselves or thrive would be my wish.
Thank you so much, Mark. You shared so much wisdom today, and I appreciate not just on your own personal life, but also all the nuggets that you've given us.
Thanks for having me.
Being on the podcast.
I really appreciate it too.
Thank you for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed today's conversation and got as much out of it as I did. As always, if this episode speaks to you, please like, share, and subscribe to Care Beyond Profits. I appreciate you, and until next time, keep caring beyond profits.